Welcome to the Worldwise Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this podcast is your guide to building a truly borderless life. From entrepreneurship, investment migration, tax optimization, and everything in between, this show highlights the nuances of a global citizen lifestyle. Let's dive in. I've been living in Paraguay on and off for about the last 2 to 3 years now, but I've been full time in Paraguay for the last 7 or 8 months, living between Ciudad del Este and Asuncion, but for the most part in Asuncion. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why I really enjoy living in Paraguay from my perspective. And I'm not going to dive into the cons that I have experienced in this video. I'm just really going to talk about the upsides, the pros. But if you're interested in learning more about some of the cons that I have experienced living here, let me know in the comments below. So first up, one of the reasons that I'm grateful for every day is that we're talking specific to Asuncion. It is such a green city. And especially coming from somewhere like Canada, where I was born and raised, although I haven't lived there in about 10 years, so I don't really have too much of a comparison from Western countries anymore, but this city, Asuncion, is so green. If you go almost anywhere in the city, it is beautiful, it is green, especially if you're walking down one of the main avenues or driving down one of the main avenues. If you're near Shopping Mariscal or Shopping Del Sol, it's just palm trees everywhere. It's beautiful. You have a blue sky for a lot of the year. You have nice white clouds against this blue sky with palm trees. Like, it's just really beautiful and such a green city. Right now, one of the areas that I'm staying in is in the Villa Aurelia area. And Villa Aurelia, Los Laureles area. And I really also like this area because it's quiet, it's tranquil, but of course, there's a lot of greenery. And now, one of the things about Asuncion that I have talked about in my vlogs, which are linked below before, is that it's not a very walkable city. Of course, there are definitely walkable parts, especially if we are in the Mariscal area near Shopping Mariscal, or to a degree near Shopping Del Sol, Paseo Galleria. But for the most part, you're going to have a car or Uber or Bolt to get around to most places. So I guess that could be one of the cons, but I really don't mind just hopping in a quick Uber. The Ubers are really affordable and being able to go almost anywhere in the city, and then it being such a nice, green, beautiful city. And of course, those main areas are still really green. Like I said, lots of palm trees, lots of cafes and restaurants. It's really nice to just sit at a cafe, sit at a restaurant, and have a beautiful view on a random Tuesday. So the greenery is something that I really do appreciate about living here. And then kind of bundled into that is the fact that, well, yes, the winters are great weather. I think at least you need a jacket, but it's nice. It's perfect. Doesn't snow, at least not that I have seen in the last few years, but it does get very hot in the summer. So that is definitely one thing to note. But for the most part, if we're talking closer to winter seasons, it's really nice. You can wear a jacket, you can walk around, and it's just nice, refreshing air. Now, maybe for the locals it's too cold, but me having grown up in Canada, it is perfect jacket weather. We're talking maybe 10, 15 degrees. So next up, one of the reasons that I really like living here in Asuncion is that it is a pretty quiet, especially when we're talking about a capital city. It's a pretty quiet, calm, tranquil capital, which I really do appreciate. Like I said, it's green, it's quiet. Of course, there are certain main avenues in certain areas where it's going to be a little bit louder, but for the most part, a lot of the areas, if you're looking for a building or a house to rent that is a little bit off of those main areas, it's going to be really quiet, calm, relaxing, a lot of greenery. And it's just really nice to feel relaxed at home. It's not a busy, bustling city. I've lived in China, I've lived in Istanbul for long term, and that's a very different vibe. So it's nice to switch it up here a little bit. Now, to piggyback off of that, another pro is that if you do want the big city, it's only an hour and a half flight to get to Buenos Aires or a 2-hour flight to get to Sao Paulo. There's a lot of different places in Latin America that you can go to. And it's nice too because most of the countries, if you speak some Spanish, you're not changing languages for the most part when you get to the other country in Latin America, obviously, aside from Brazil. But for the most part, it's pretty easy and convenient to hop off the plane, especially if you've been there before, and be either on a beach, be in a big city, be in the mountains. Latin America really has it all when you combine all of the countries, and it's pretty quick, pretty affordable. Obviously, there are, especially from Asuncion, there are certain layovers if you're looking to get to Colombia or sometimes to Rio de Janeiro. So there are certain layovers where it's going to make the flight sometimes quite a bit longer, but there are direct routes that you can get. Or if you really want to, you can even bus. You might have to have a few connections. It'll probably take you a long time. I would not know from experience, but that is always an option. Now, another big reason that I really like living in Paraguay is the food. So I actually talked about this in the last episode of 2024 when I had a little bit of a life update and again sharing why I really liked living here at that time. And what I really talked about in that episode was the food. I really enjoy the high quality food, specifically beef, that Paraguay has to offer. Now, I was a vegetarian for 15 years of my life. I have no regrets, but I actually decided, I made a conscious decision to stop becoming a vegetarian, not when I was in Canada, not when I was anywhere else, but when I came back to Paraguay. That was when I was really going to start eating specifically the beef here in Paraguay. If you know anything about Paraguay, the history, there's a certain area a little bit north of here called Chaco. It gets very hot in the summer, but that's where a lot of the open space grass fields are. And while I am not too sure about the level of factory farming in this country, and I don't think most locals really have insider knowledge of that either from the conversations that I've had, but it sounds for the most part like there's not too much factory farming happening here in Paraguay, which I really appreciate. I didn't want to start eating meat somewhere like Canada or the US or even Mexico nowadays, where it's a lot more of a consumerist culture. There's tons of Walmarts all over, reminds me more of the US than anything. But here I mean, there's really one major supermarket in the entire country that's big enough to really have all the products you need. If you're looking at a true supermarket, which is Super Says, they have a huge section of meat, like two huge aisles of fridges full of meat, good quality meat. And once you really know the brands and the brands that you're looking for, you can, for the most part, get good quality, we hope, Paraguayan raised beef. So I really do appreciate that about the country. And just the quality of food is something, and the greenery, I would say, are two big things that have really kept me sticking around for so long. And what I can really appreciate about the country, because a lot of countries in today's day and age, it's factory farmed meat, you don't really know where it's coming from. I'm not saying that that is completely the opposite in Paraguay. Of course, there's a business around production of beef, but I do hope and think, at least, and I think many others in Paraguay do as well, that the beef industry is more like what it used to be than what it is now in a lot of countries. And I really do appreciate that about this country. If you are interested in learning more about just general lifestyle living in Paraguay, or even supermarket prices and what you can expect to pay at the supermarket, I have videos on all of I have videos on all of that linked below, whether they be travel vlogs of living in Paraguay, traveling in Paraguay, what a day looks like in Paraguay, walking the street, or supermarket prices. And then we also have some walking tours that are just walking the streets in Paraguay, and those are also linked below. So before I talk about the last few points, I'm going to touch on safety. Safety is definitely a concern for many, especially when you're coming from certain countries in the world. And I will say there are, and you'll learn if you've never been here before pretty quickly, there are certain areas where you're going to want to not necessarily stay away from, but especially at night, you're not going to want to go outside too late after dark. And then there's certain areas like Shopping Mariscal, certain parts of Shopping Del Sol area, where I feel pretty comfortable pretty late at night. I mean, I find cars are usually on the road most evenings until 11 or 12. So if you're close to a main avenue, you're walking alone at night, if you're in one of these main areas like Shopping Mariscal, you're going to feel pretty safe. And these aren't huge areas either. I mean, it's a few main blocks and then it's just residential after that. Of course, there are certain areas here where you're probably going to want to stay away from. So that's more so the old central area of Asuncion, closer to the river, closer to the Costanera. But when you're staying there, you really know, and the locals will tell you, at night, you don't want to go out. There's certain areas where you maybe may not want to stay longer term. So once you're here, you really get a good feel for the areas where you're going to want to be. But also, I mean, the Shopping del Sol, Shopping Mariscal, the commercial areas are really where a lot of things are just going on. So that's probably where you're going to gravitate to, especially if you want activities to do, restaurants, cafes, go to the mall, just hang out, general living, go to some bars. It's all going to be in that general area. So the last thing I want to touch on is the opportunity here in Paraguay. Now it's 2025 and there's not opportunity in every country in the globe. A lot of the opportunity, whether it be for rental markets, purchasing real estate, starting businesses, is really capped out in a lot of countries. But since being here for the last few years, I've really found that there's still so much opportunity. Of course, depends on a lot of different factors, but just generally overall speaking, there's a lot of opportunity still to be untapped. There's a lot of opportunities still to be tapped here in Paraguay. So whether that be business, bringing certain businesses or companies into the country that are in a lot of other jurisdictions but aren't here yet, that could also be having rental yields. So there's a lot. If you've been here in the last few years, you've definitely seen all of the new developments that are going up in the areas near Shopping Mariscal, Shopping del Sol. Those are really the commercial areas. So those are where a lot of the yields for investors are going to be. And we have a team who helps with this. We're talking with developers about what this market looks like here in Paraguay, but it's really interesting to see. And I've analyzed a lot of the other markets throughout Latin America, and there's a lot of opportunity here. We're not only talking about new builds for apartments, but also just simply buying a home or a duplex. There's a lot of opportunity and also affordability where pre-built, you can get an apartment in a good location for 50, 60,000 at the lowest price. That's basic apartment, studio apartment, but that's pretty affordable when you're looking at prices in the West or even other countries in Latin America. Quite honestly, trust me, I've looked at almost every other market in Latin America. Yes, Paraguay, there's definitely cons. It's not all pros. There's definitely not a lot of liquidity in this market. So there are things to look out for if you're investing in this market, but there's still a lot of opportunity if you get in on the right project at the right time is really the key. So that's a big thing that I see both for business opportunities, for property and real estate development, purchasing, rentals, whatnot. There's still a lot of opportunity here. And when you're on the ground, when you know the right people, it becomes really apparent what still can be done in this country, which won't last forever, of course, but it's a really interesting opportunity at this point in time in Paraguay. So that is my take. That is why I'm really loving Paraguay and why I'm really content being here for the time being after having traveled the world for the last 4 years and then living in Turkey and China before that. So if you're interested in seeing what a day living in Paraguay looks like, supermarket prices, or simply just walking tours of the streets of Paraguay, all those videos are linked below. And thank you for joining me here. You've just listened to the Worldwise Wealth Podcast. Visit our links in the show notes below or at worldwisecapital.com to learn more about how we can assist in your borderless diversification journey. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.